Good morning, all. Selamat pagi semuanya. I am Anil, Marketing Director from Whisper Media. Thank you for joining our webinar session. Today, we will be discussing about what brands can be considered in the new norms that is created by the COVID-19 pandemic. Should brands pull the plug on advertising? Whisper Media, in partnership with Kantar, will be exploring this question. Today, we have with us Nelson, Head of Media Analytics and Digital for Kantar, along with Mr. Suresh and Ms. Olivia from Kantar as well. The presentation will be around 45 minutes, followed by the Q&A session. We are happy to take your questions and our expert panel will address it. Please submit the questions in the Q&A box. We will try to address as many questions on live. Rest of the questions will be answered by email. With that short note, let me pass it on to Nelson. Over to you, Nelson. Thank you.
Thanks, Anil. Hello, everyone. Thanks to Whisper Media to give us this opportunity to share our point of view on the biggest question that because of this pandemic is happening. Should brands keep advertising or stop advertising during this time? I will try to take you through some understanding of what's happening and towards the end, some guidance on how to address communication during these times. So one thing that we are seeing clearly is a shift in interest triggered by COVID. When we see all the tendencies and trends on Google search, their long-term orientation is taking over, and some relief of anxiety, like humor is increasing, thinking on investing, interest has increased, education, etc. And on the other hand, non-essentials and experientials obviously have declined interest, like ticket sales, restaurants, real estate, sports, travel, etc. And all this has been reflected in temporary incidents. We obviously see that FMCGs, especially personal care, has a bigger impact in terms of incidents during COVID. But also others, personal care, obviously with hand sanitizer and all this. However, we see also increase in incidents in dairy, home care, beverage, and packaged food. Basically, most of out-of-home consumption, it's happening at home. But what's interesting is also that the non-essentials have not been forgotten, they just have put on hold. So we could expect repressed demand. For example, if we look in the right-hand side, when we ask consumers, would categories that you have planned to buy but are delayed, and categories that you have not planned to acquire but now are you considering? If we see travel, for example, is something that it has ignited this. So after COVID is over, we are expecting a repressed demand overflow on certain categories that are not essentials, so to speak. Also, other non-essential have gained territory based of the lockdown. We see OTTs, teleconferencing, education apps, etc., had been of increase in interest based on the lockdown. Now, the biggest question, should brands advertise during this time? We, based on our consumer barometer, COVID barometer, only 3% of consumers in Indonesia consider that brands should stop advertising. This is even lower than the global average, which is 8%. So consumers still trying to feel a normality, a normal sense of not being locked down and everything surrounding COVID. They still expect brands to advertise. However, we know that although that's what consumer expects, there is a lot of issues or problems in terms of supply, in terms of demand. So advertisers are holding on expense. We see, for example, in the United States, there was a huge research done, and a lot of advertisers are pulling up all advertising investment altogether. Others have decreased by 50%. So we expect this, and it's happening already here in Indonesia, but these for brands that actually decide to advertise could present cost-saving opportunities, because at the end of the day, with less advertisers, there is more inventory availability, therefore the rates decrease. And this is very evident when we look at, for example, in digital. In general, Google search, this is worldwide data, Google search, the average cost per click has not really moved, you know, before and during COVID lockdown. However, the click-to rate has increased. So for the same amount of clicks, for the same amount of money, we are being more effective in terms of clicks. However, in Google Display, the story is even better, because the average cost per click have actually decreased, and the click-to rate has increased. So not only Google Display has become more efficient, but also more effective as well. So this presents cost-saving opportunities. On the other hand, from a Facebook perspective, the Wall Street Journal and a lot of marketing technology companies have done a study worldwide to try to understand, you know, the decrease of CPM and cost on Facebook. And in average, it's a 20% decrease on Facebook. So even if you are buying the same amount of impressions, it will be a 20% cost reduction in terms of Facebook. These also help us be more streamline our approach to media. We know that in normal condition, based on our Connect studies, that 20% of touch points normally delivered 80% of the total brand impact. So this is a perfect opportunity to focus, and instead of having a full-on 360 approach to media, focus on specifically those touch points that actually deliver the highest impact. Now, how will brands benefit by keeping in communication with consumers? In here we see analytics, marketing mix modeling output, where we have 4 different points that builds the total sales. In the base, we see the base sales of the brand stock. This is the sales that will happen no matter what, based on history and distribution of the product itself. The second level is sales due to the existing brand equity. This brand equity is normally built, or part of it, it's a large part of it is normally built by advertising. The long-term effect of advertising that will give you sales. Even if you stop advertising today, you will still have some sales due to this brand equity that has built based on advertising. The third level is sales uplift from the brand equity of the current campaign that is happening. And last but not least is the direct impact of advertising on sales. Now, based on the types of brands that have increased sales, have repressed sales, etc., during this time, there are benefits to it. So if we think about the conjunctural brands, or the brands, for example, that Netflix or Zoom, etc., that have been benefit from the lockdown, they can take an approach of just staying back and, you know, say, there is an organic demand, so I don't need to advertise. However, for these brands specifically, we don't want, they could have the Mandalorian effect. That means that after COVID lockdown is over, everyone will retrieve out. Therefore, this is the perfect opportunity, because you have most eyeballs in you as a brand, to start building that equity. The second level is the non-essential brands, let's say travel. Of course, there is a struggle. However, based on our brand seed study, we know that brands with the stronger equity recovered 9 times faster than other brands during after a crisis. And this is based on the economic crisis in 2008. So therefore, although there will be less, it will not be a sales-driven type of communication. Keeping communication during this time for non-essential types of categories is crucial to rebound after all this is over. There is a better chance to recover after all this is over. And last but not least, if we think about the essentials of the brands that are winning, it's very competitive. You need to win the war right now. If we think about, for example, Dettol was the most searched hand sanitizer when everything started. However, after a while, brands and companies that have not been in that category innovate and put this product as part of their product line. So it's all to capitalize in the competitive environment that is happening now. And there are several examples of this. We see, for example, in conjunctural brands or brands that are benefiting from the lockdown, Ranguru is offering 30 gigabytes of internet free through Telkomsel to be used in their app. Also, in non-essentials like ticket.com, which is travel, they try to keep communication, but having a fundraising campaign and providing health, providing equipment for medical workers, which is, trying to drive meaningfulness. And essential brands, like Dettol in this case, having to use the fastest growing social media right now, which is TikTok, with a hand wash challenge. So there are several examples of how each type of brand could continue the communication with consumers. Now, not surprisingly, we know that because of lockdown, the two touch points, or the two media that are benefiting about this is TV and digital, because most people in Indonesia are staying at home. Therefore, all the out-of-home and other type of media are not benefiting. TV and digital are the most benefiting in this case. Now, if brands decided to go online, especially brands that have not experienced or are very sporadic in terms of advertising online, digital efforts need to be continuous. We have done a lot of cross-media studies, and we have seen that in general, campaigns on digital that have less than 7 weeks on air deliver impact. However, when it comes to brands that have more weeks on air, the impact increase. This is not the same when it comes to, we have not achieved at the point of diminishing returns. So in that sense, digital effort must be continued, have an always on type of approach to digital channels. However, when we go digital, we need to be very mindful of differentiation, because all this has been very sudden. Most of the communication have been very similar. We saw a lot of change of logos of a lot of relevant brands basically doing the same. So therefore, they are not standing out. We see a lot of challenges in terms of washing hands, etc. So it's harder to stand out. So brands need to be very focus on how you will stand out. And also because more people are watching, are glued to their cell phones, their even desktop desktop usage has increased. Saturation may come faster. In the right-hand side, we have done some analysis trying to see the carryover effect or the lag effect of advertising into sales. And in normal conditions, TV has a much lasting lag effect than digital channels. In fact, we see that for every one piece of content that TV has, in digital, there should be 3 to 4 to have the same lag effect. This probably will be lesser right now because people are overexposed to digital channels. So in this sense, brands need to find a different angle of communication to try to stand out. Try to also alternate creative faster than in normal conditions, and be very mindful of frequency caps. Because if before we are trying to have X amount of impressions, try to be consumed in, let's say, a month, because of the overexposure or people, staying much more time on digital, that those impressions may be consumed faster. So need to be very mindful of frequency caps. Also, and this is especially for brands that are relatively new to digital, we need to understand that digital is not really a touch point, but an ecosystem of touch points and platforms. And here, I'm gonna take you through some differences between Facebook and YouTube, which are some of the biggest digital platforms. When we think about efficiency and effectiveness, Facebook is much more efficient, whereas YouTube is much more effective. What does it mean? For YouTube, based on our studies, for YouTube to actually make impact on brands, you need less impressions. However, for Facebook, although you need more impressions, it's cheaper than YouTube. And on the other hand, when we think or we want to plan digital, we need to be very aware not only of the general, reach, frequency, usage, but also how people behave within these platforms. And here is a clear example only from a video perspective. People, and this is based on our context lab studies, people in general skip videos on Facebook after 3 seconds. This happened in YouTube after 8 seconds. And although it's very small, 5 seconds in 5-second difference in this case in communication, something. On the other hand, we have seen that the completion rate is only 15%, meaning all the people that watch the video, only 15% watching until the end in Facebook. That is 40% on YouTube. And one of the most interesting things is, based on our context lab as well, when people are exposed to video on Facebook, they are normally just 10% have audio on, whereas this is 95% in YouTube. So in this sense, try to avoid a cookie cutter approach when planning. Put the same video or the same ad that you're putting on TV, putting in other platforms. It has to be different. It has to be more in tune with how people behave. In this case, for video specifically, early visual engagement is needed because people are skipping faster, and messages have to be a bit simpler, and especially for Facebook, consider subtitles. Now, from a TV perspective, there are a lot of implications. We know that a lot of people are watching more TV. In fact, in our COVID barometer, we see that 64 consumers had increased the TV consumption. And considering the TV consumption is already in the high levels, this is very, very interesting. So it has a lot of implications. Based on Nielsen data, we see that from Jan to April, there has an overall increase on reach overall TV of 2%. Like I said, this is a lot considering that already TV viewership is very, very high. But what's more interesting is that in the same period from Jan to April, there is an increase of 13% on the average time spent on watching TV per people. This has a lot of implications, especially from a frequency perspective. Now, we know this is weeks, the 16 weeks that we are in. The right-hand side, the square part is during lockdown. We see that rating has increased. Obviously, people are locked down, people are watching more TV. However, there is a higher gap between the commercial break rating versus the in-content rating. So if rating increase, that may affect the CPRP. Therefore, there is an opportunity to actually consider in-content options that are not related to CPRP. This is something that probably need to be discussed with the media agency to find opportunities to balance the CPRP in consideration of the rating increase. Other thing is we have seen in the left-hand side that although viewership has increased, in terms of the prime time, it's almost the same in terms of rating. However, non-prime time, especially morning to noon, has dramatically increased. So probably also in terms of controlling cost is a good way to start exploring other day parts rather than just prime time. And on the other hand, we know based on our cross-media studies that there is a point of diminishing return on frequencies on TV. Based on 17 cross-media studies that we have done in Indonesia, we know that from a campaign perspective, after 16 exposures per person, there is no more incremental brand impact. However, most of the, in average, in average, we see that the average frequency that TV campaigns are delivering is 22 to 24. That means that every additional exposure is not adding any impact on brand. Now, this is overall exposure. This is not planning frequency. So meaning if you have a reach plus 3, that means that you are planning for 3 exposures per week. This is the overall exposure or the overall frequency of exposure in the length of a campaign. So there are ways to control the budget, also dialing down. This is in normal condition. Therefore, knowing that more people are watching more time now, frequencies overexposure is an issue. So there is a good opportunity to dial down the frequencies to manage costs as well. Now we are already entering the fasting month, and this is the average rating. On the left-hand side is part is pre-Ramadan, the white part is during Ramadan, and the brown part is after Ramadan of 2019. We see that there is a clear decrease on rating on TV after Ramadan. Obviously, everyone is moody, going back to their hometowns, etc. But with the ban of mudik that happened here in Indonesia, this behavior may not be expected. The drop may not happen. So we still have opportunities entering Ramadan to keep communicating with consumers on. And again, it's an opportunity to stand out as there is less clutter. We see that there is a dramatic drop in terms of the number of spots compared to last year. And also the total duration inventory as well is a dramatic drop. So all in all, it is a good opportunity to start seeing different ways to manage the rating and reach impact on CPRPs. Maybe exploring in-content options is one alternative. Exploring non-prime time day parts as well is something that would be interesting to do with conversations that you have to have with the media agency, and especially manage frequencies to optimize investment. Like we saw in normal condition, there is already an overspend in terms of frequencies. So there's an opportunity to dial down those frequencies on TV. Now, because of the lockdown, all exposure to out of home, it's not making an impact. And based on several studies that we have done in the past, we know that out of home normally has a impact in the lower funnel metrics, like a brand most likely to buy, purchase intent, brand association, brand use most often. Therefore, brands now need to be exploring different ways to do it. One of the key things, or the fast answer, is go to e-commerce. However, based on consumer behavior, we have seen that a lot of people are mostly in Facebook and Instagram. Therefore, exploring social commerce is an alternative. You know, there are shoppable ads both in Facebook and Instagram. There are chatbots that can help in drive consideration as well. And we have seen also that influencers in certain categories have an impact on lower funnel metrics. So then again, it's a time to explore these alternatives to try to mitigate the impact of not having out-of-home exposure. Other thing that we should expect is a lot of overlap between digital and TV, and synergies between digital and TV. Again, based on our cross-media studies, we have seen that in average, there is an overlap across campaigns. There is an overlap of around 50% between TV and digital. That means that in average per campaign, we are reaching 50% of the people, both on digital and TV. We expect, because of the lockdown and the lack of exposure, especially to out of home, that this overlap will be bigger. That has implication also in the frequency, because if we think frequency just from a frequency of exposure just from a channel perspective and not from an overall perspective, we may be increasing that. Meaning, if I put the same content on TV and the same content on digital, we are exposing already 2 times because of high overlap. So when thinking about frequencies, is not only thinking frequencies within the touch point, but also across touch points. And also synergies will be higher. We know based on studies, also based on cross-media studies, that the strongest synergies is always happening between TV and digital channels. So we need to plan for this. And one of the best things to do is not only try to customize and integrate from a touchpoint perspective, but also from a content perspective. We have seen, based on meta-analysis, that when brands are well integrated into their media mix, but also have tailored content in each platform, there is a 25% increase, a 26% increase on brand metrics. So in this sense, content customization for each platform is very relevant to drive these synergies. And also we think is a perfect opportunity to try to think different Indonesia's to drive meaningfulness. When we think, when we ask consumers how they feel, how they purchase, what categories are there, they are considering, there are differences between each island in this case, or in each region. Therefore, it's a very good opportunity to start thinking, how do I address the different feelings, the different purchase behaviors, and the different needs of consumers to tailor to each region in this sense. So yes, national campaign is good, but there may be needs that need to be addressed in different areas that may not be needed in other areas. So this is the perfect opportunity to do it. And like we see here, people in Sumatra are not so optimistic in terms of they will come out stronger after all this crisis, whereas in Java and other islands, they are more optimistic in that sense. We think stocking up, people in Sumatra, actually, they don't stock up. However, in Java, they tend to think that they need to stock up in terms of products, even in terms of some non-essentials consideration. Categories that people have not planned to purchase, but now will consider to purchase. Banking services in general from Sumatra is very relevant, whereas it's not in other islands and in Java. So need to be very diligent into understanding differences on each region and address it in your communication. Also, when in terms of communication, doubling down on COVID communication may not be the only way. We know that consumers are overexposed. They are actually opting in, searching a lot of COVID-related news. They are always watching the news, etc. And from the other hand, we see that humor is something that has been increased. There are a lot of memes related to the lockdown that people are trying to see. A lot of challenges, you know, until tomorrow, there are some dances, etc. So doubling down just on COVID communication might not be the only way to address this. So we go and ask consumers, what do we expect for brands? And there is no evidence of a dramatic change in change of mind of consumers. We see that 73% will keep buying the same brands as always. And when we ask them what brands should do during this time, only 30% they say that should attack the crisis and demonstrate how can it be fought. Only 20% said need to be practical, realistic, and help consumers in everyday life. So there is not much of a need from a consumer perspective that brands need to address in their communication the COVID situation. Now, from an advertising perspective, and this is very interesting, we see the differences. We ask the same questions in our barometer, and we see big differences globally and in Indonesia. For example, in the question we asked, companies should not explode the situation, is 47% of global said yes, and only 47% in Indonesia. And humor, we know Indonesia likes humor. Brands should avoid humor stunts. Only 21% said in Indonesia that is it. this doesn't mean that brands in their communications should not address COVID, but need to have a right balance, because people want to have a sense of normality when they turn on the TV and not be bombarded by everything COVID related. And last but not least, and this is very for people that are familiar with programmatic, it's a good opportunity to go back to the agencies and relook at the brand safety measures. Why? We know that one of the most blacklisted keywords are coronavirus and related, because it's always associated with death rates and bad news, etc. However, based on psychology, we know that a positive message, or a message of hope in this case, surrounding an environment of negativity, in this case news, actually stands out more. So juxtaposing a positive and hopeful message in a COVID-related content could actually present an opportunity to stand out, driving meaningfulness to consumers, but also, have more eyes, because it would be a less clear content. So this is some conversation that is interesting to have with either the creative or the digital agency, to relook at brand safety measures and see if there is an opportunity, and how, from a communication perspective, get into these previously logged publishers. So all in all, brands should consider continued advertising. There are a lot of benefits independent on if you're an essential and non-essential brand. There is a good evidence that show that keep a line of communication with consumers is necessary. And this industry contraction in terms of advertising itself presents cost efficiency opportunities, need to be explored, cost reduction, rates reduction, manage of frequencies, etc. Also, brands need to be mindful of overexposure, because now people are more on TV and more on digital, and manage creatives and frequencies. Also, especially on digital, because these are very sensitive times, pre-testing messaging context, it's very relevant. Doing A/B testing live, if let's say a brand tries to do humor communication, may backfire. Therefore, it's better to pre-test, see response, and then go live. Be mindful and plan for synergies and the higher overlap that will happen on TV and digital. For non-essential brands, they should keep communication to protect the long-term equity and have a better starting point when everything, to recuperate after everything or the lockdown is over. For essential and conjunctural brands, should act now and use context in creative way, in differentiative ways. And last but not least, brands should consider to address different Indonesia, the different needs of each region, and try to cater their communication to that. That's it from me. Should we go to the Q&A?
Yes, Nelson. There are a few questions we already answered on the online, but we can pick and choose some of.
So yes, my SCD, what part of marketing value change in this pandemic has the most potential to offer value to advertisers? Influencers. Yes, we have seen influencers have an interesting role, and people are appreciating the fact that there are, the pandemic have made them more humans in that sense, because they are not they cannot travel, they are not showing, the crazy stuff, etc. So people are appreciating to showing this more intimate aspect of influencers. And based on an analysis, there are a lot of merits to have influencers in certain categories, especially beauty categories, and now a lot of cooking ingredients categories are driven or influencers may be a very good thing to drive not only awareness, but also like I said before, lower funnel metrics. So have channel preference changed in terms of consumption? We have seen from Comscore's perspective, the most consumed touch points have been TV and digital, and they have increased. Like we saw, even from a Comscore perspective, not only unique visitors, but also the time spent per visitor has increased dramatically between Jan and April. So in terms of preferences are the same. However, the consumption itself has increased dramatically. Should TV be more impact and digital for frequency? Yes, that's a good point. However, because of the like I explained, the lag effect of digital channels, that might have implication of changing more frequent the content itself. The lag effect means if I advertise today, how long the advertising effect, either on awareness or on sales, carry over time. This is very short in digital. This is larger in TV. Therefore, yes, digital, because of a cost efficiency perspective, could help drive frequency. Remember, we may not overexpose people to some messages. And if we are planning to do that, the best way is to alternate creatives as frequently as we can. So why different regions should have different communication? This is very relevant. Not only from a product perspective, also from a feeling perspective. We have seen that not all region and not all cities have the same needs. Therefore, during this pandemic, this is in haste. For example, if we think about shopping online, has been particularly increasing in Jabodetabek, but not in other regions. Or incidence on certain categories has been largely in Jabodetabek, but not in other regions. So if we want to communicate, we need to be very aware of the needs of each region and cater to those needs. So it's better to have, if we are talking about, media placement efficiency and effectiveness based on region, we think that it's better to cater specific needs. I mean, obviously from a digital perspective, that's easier to do. You can have different, by geo-targeting, you can have different communication, different product, different promotions per region. That's easier to do. However, and again, being with Whisper Media here, this is also possible to do on TV. So explaining about the digital and as an ecosystem. Okay, so normally when some brands have not explored digital, consider digital as a one touch point and let's say just say I want to do video, therefore I just take the TV commercial and put it on Facebook, on Instagram, and on YouTube, etc. Each platform in this case behaves differently. Like we saw, there are specific ways. If let's say we do this in terms of Facebook, people may not be aware of what's being exposed because one, they skip faster, and second, they scroll without the volume on. Therefore, need to understand that the specifics of each platform and what each platform is good for, and then create the engagement. I don't know if that answered the question itself. And new brands should enter digital. This is the perfect time to do it. This is actually the perfect time to do it, but need to be in a meaningful way on one hand, and understanding the consumer behavior on each platform on the other hand. Is there any shift in gender preference? This part we don't know. However, what has been exposed is that specifically news has been increased a lot. Is there any difference between urban and rural consumer? We have not have this view right now during COVID. However, we have good views before COVID, and there are differences. Like I said, even from a feelings perspective versus a product incidence perspective. Normally, rural is more about accessibility to things that they didn't have before. Whereas urban is more about their own consumption, their own satisfaction and indulgence. I saw the presentation has the strongest connection, TV and social media. So there is there are some, as far as I know, there are some in terms of the interplay, you know, how to manage the synergies or the dual exposure of TV and social media. There are some vendors that actually can help and drive TV sync. What it means is basically try to coordinate whenever a TVC appears on TV, it automatically triggers either a social media or a mobile programmatic campaign. So you can either double down on the lost attention or continue the engagement. There are some vendors that can actually do that. That's a very good question, because now the synergies will be higher. Therefore, you know, if we know that a person is exposed to an advertisement on TV, we can double down the communication, activating programmatic campaign on the phone. Most of radio consumption, what we have seen, happens during commute because of lockdown. Then there is less, we don't have the data, but we assume the radio consumption is less during these times. Radio in rural, yes, that is something that we will check. We don't have information about this. Again, a lot of radio consumption happens on the commute, and with social distancing and lockdown, there is not much of exposure to radio. I think we have here a question. Anil, I don't know if you can answer this one. Is related to DBI specifically.
Which one, Nelson?
Has any brand used Whisper Media DBIs to insert COVID relevant products inside the content to drive home stronger messaging and association?
There are few brands use their creative executions in line with the COVID message. So they were not trying to push the product exactly, but they were trying to use the association with the context or association with the situation. So there are some 3-4 creatives have been executed in line with the COVID messages.
Olivia, sorry, I don't speak Bahasa. Olivia, I don't know if you can help answering this question.
Let me try to translate first so that we can tackle it together. So the question from Anonymous is, since the rating program is higher than commercial break, does this mean that reach that we get will be higher if we campaign in program or content like NLS?
So in general, reach is higher now. In that sense, if we only think about the reach from now and isolate reach, that means that we will need probably less GRPs to achieve the same amount of reach because more people are watching TV. However, rating has also increased, therefore the CPRP most likely to increase. So this is more an alert to go to the media agency and start planning or exercising different scenarios to see what's the best way to do it. One thing, like we said before, could be go to content itself, sponsorship, DBI, etc. That is an alternative because not only is not linked to a general CPRP guarantee part because it's not lose spot, it would also gain much more eyeballs because it has higher reach. But also, like we said, start exploring other day parts that have increased viewership lately. So it's more of a start exploring what are the best alternatives to manage the CPRP with the media agency, considering, increase of viewership in day parts that are not prime time, dialing down frequencies, therefore, the total GRPs will be affected, etc. So start exercising those to see how you can manage the CPRP itself. Olive, there is another here.
Yeah. Okay, so the next one is relating to TV viewership. Can we assume that there is increase in respective region or market and not at national level only?
That part we don't have, although we assume that normally, rural regions have higher incidence of TV than urban. We don't see this changing much. However, again, this is something that the media agency could actually look at.
Okay, I will type the answers in Bahasa, so hopefully that answers your question.
Okay.
Thank you.
There is one more, Nelson.
Yes, would branded content be something to consider in the near future? Branded content integration on OTT content. Yes, that's definitely something that will be relevant. A lot of OTT platforms don't have commercial options. Therefore, the content itself is what drives things. So there is definitely something that needs to be explored. OTT platforms are gaining terrain right now. Netflix was one of the biggest winners. However, the local video.com as well has increased their footprint. Therefore, it's again an opportunity to start driving in content on OTT platforms. It's a good alternative in the future. What's the effective and efficient way to allocate our budget between TV and digital? This depends, this actually depends on each brand and each type of communication. What we have seen that most of the time, based on our studies that we have done, there is an opportunity to dial down a bit, the investments on TV, mostly based on frequency, to allocate a bit more on digital. There is not a overall consensus of how much TV and how much digital. It has to be very case by case basis, and depending on the category, depending on the brand, etc. But overall, we have seen that there is a lot of room to decrease some investment on TV and allocate it in digital to actually have much more brand impact.
Is there any more questions? Or is there any questions? We'll go through it. Is there any questions if missed out from answering it? We will respond to you by email. We will wrap up for now. Is there any questions, you can also email to us. You can reply to marketing@whisper-w.com. So we'll whatever the answers needs to be done by Nelson and team from Kantar can be passed on to them, and they will respond to your questions as well. All right. Anything else, Nelson, to add?
That's it. Hope it can help and ignite conversations with your agencies, and stay safe.
Yep. Thank you all. Thank you for your time. And it's wonderful to be here with everyone. And everybody, please be safe. Stay at home and safe at home. Thank you.
Thank you.